I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Sarah and Magnus. I've not met Sarah before, which I think is outrageous. She's got no idea that she's about to join the Marketing Academy community. Magnus, I've known for years. Magnus has been a supporter of the Marketing Academy for the last 10 years. I think he's still mentoring for us now. It's super cool. So I'm amongst friends and I'm delighted. So we're going to talk about culture this morning. Obviously, the main tenet of winning together is the fact that business development should be everybody's business. And what we're going to explore is how the culture of our organisations can either help support winning, support business development, or indeed impede it. And I thought I ought to do a little bit of research because clearly I've just discovered I'm probably the oldest person in the room for the entire day today, which is really pissing me off. But it also means that when the guys were talking about starting their careers in like the 1990s, I started my career in the 1980s. And back then, culture was very different in most organisations. So I did a little bit of research on organisational culture. And I was really thrilled to see in the first few hits that there are only 4 organisational cultures, right? And they are clan culture, adhocracy culture, I needed to look that up, it basically means entrepreneurial, market culture, which is results orientated, and hierarchy or authority culture. And I thought, oh, that's easy, 4 cultures, we'll nail that in 10 minutes. And then I looked a bit further. And like the next 3 hits were like, these are the 6 organisational cultures. And the next 4 hits were like, these are the 8 organisational cultures. And there was things like, get these, empowered culture, culture of innovation, sales culture, customer-centric culture, culture of leadership excellence, culture of safety, purpose culture, caring culture, order culture, results culture, enjoyment culture, I like the sound of that one, learning culture. And I thought, oh, fuck's sake, it's just a complete mess. So we're going to work it all out. We're going to nail it. And I thought we'd actually start by just trying to unpick what even culture is. So Sarah, if I can come to you first. When I say organizational culture or company culture or cultural DNA, what does that actually mean to you?
So this is one of my favorite topics, and I've been lucky enough to work at some agencies that have had very different cultures. And when we sort of say, when agency you do an interview and people say, oh, we have a great culture, you know, I used to think it sort of was and often people mean what they can see around, or we've got free coffee, we're friendly, we've got some soft seating, we've got a nice office. But as I've sort of progressed through different agencies and like you, done a bit more reading and learning around it, what I've come to realize, or what I've, you know, some of my favorite definitions of it are, culture just is. Like as long as there are people that work in an organization, there is culture. It's just this sort of systemic element of having everyone together and what the bits that happen in between the interactions. And you can acknowledge it or manage it, but it's there whether you want it or not. And then you sort of think, well, why do we go on about it so much? Why do companies talk about their culture? Why is it important? One of my favorite writers on the topic is Anne Morris and her wife Frances Frey, and they talk about culture. It's my favorite definition. Culture is what guides behavior when management aren't in the room. So it's really what they talk about it is it's what guides discretionary behavior. So it picks up where that employee handbook leaves off. So for example, you know, a leader might say, we've got an amazing culture here, but to really understand the culture, you just observe what's happening. So it's what guides how you treat new people. It's what guides who you tell when something's gone wrong or whether or not you tell someone. It's what guides how you respond to an unexpected request from a client. It's the sort of innate thing that when you're in an environment guides the behavior of the people that are there. So it's quite intangible, but it exists. And I think the key for agency leaders or anyone at any level is culture's there whether you want it or not. The question is, how much do you try and shape it and acknowledge it and make it a positive force rather than make it a kind of negative discretionary force? So it's really, really fascinating. It's really fascinating, and it has a huge impact on how well teams and companies perform.
Thank you. Magnus, what's your view?
It's very similar. So I think fundamental culture to me it's the thing that defines every single interaction that happens in an organisation. And I sort of I take slight umbrage at the definitions that are written down, because the key bit, and I'll say exactly the thing I said on my first day 10 years ago at Saatchi, which was this culture of Saatchi, I said to people, and our agency doesn't belong to me just because I've turned up here. It's not owned by my boss. It's not owned by the publicist group. It's not owned by clients. The culture is defined by the people that walk in the door, both as employees of the agency and also as the clients. Those people, the talent that walks the door, they define the culture. It's their culture. It always will be theirs. So all those in leadership can do is help to nurture it, help to make sure basically that people understand it and clear about it, because it is intangible. And it is, I would say this very funny story I used to have. There's a lady who now runs Media Arts Lab that Sarah may come across, called Keynote Discussion, who came over to Saatchi with me from Fallon, and we sat there, and it was this really odd scenario where we'd find, and we didn't know what to say. We could only talk to each other. There used to be these little squares of toilet tissue that were on the floor around Saatchi. We couldn't understand it in Charlotte Street, and we'd sort of both sit there and go like, where is someone going round and putting these bits of toilet tissue on the floor? And he's like, because where's it coming from? And he sort of went, because neither of us asked straight away. We only spoke to each other. It was weird. And then it sort of dawned on us basically, like, because the toilets had those sort of sheets that you pull out rather than the roll. So what was happening is, full of the floor, getting stuck on people's feet, and they were walking around the corridors with it. And there was a moment basically about 18 months in when we went, we felt as if that point of like, it's your culture, this is your house and your home, and we'd succeeded in it, landed, because we couldn't see the toilet tissue. Because what it meant is that people that realise it's there, and if you see toilet tissue on the floor in your house, you pick it up. So you don't see it. So you realise at that point what we have done is help people understand this is their culture, this is their home. I can't see the toilet tissue anymore.
Oh, amazing. 18 months. 18 months of toilet paper on the floor. Oh my God.
I'm going like, who is someone doing that?
Also, I love that these are the big decisions that senior people have to get together and talk about. It's like, where is this coming from?
Little things.
None of them picked it up. It's even more telling.
Well, no, but it meant, what it said to me, it told you there was that's the culture didn't feel like it was owned. It felt like it was coming from the top, so people felt like they were employees basically rather than guardians of culture.
Yeah. No, I get it. Charles Handy said, culture is just how things get done around here.
Yeah. What's really interesting though is, I don't think, you're completely right. It's a sort of what guides people's behavior. And I always find it a bit frustrating when people go, well, culture just is what it is. Because what if you join a business where it's not a good culture, as in you can see maybe there's bullying or there's poor performance or people are disengaged, and can senior people or any people try and influence it? And I think they can. I don't think it has to come from the top, but I think there are definitely ways that it can be guided and shaped. So things like what behaviors are focused upon and kind of called out, and what behaviors also critically are ignored. So we've all been places where people say, we great voices can't, we'll take ideas from anywhere. We're a really collaborative culture. And then young people get spoken over in meetings, or women get spoken over in meetings and no one says anything about it. So ignoring the behaviors that you don't want and allowing them to happen is often one way that senior people inadvertently influence a culture. But also I think you can focus on really positive things. So when it comes to new business, it's like people say, we might have a really, we have a really entrepreneurial culture. And it's like, okay, well, how often do you really celebrate people who win things? Like, how much of a focus do you put on that? And how do you treat people who how do you treat failed projects? You know, because no one's going to step forward and go, you know, say, we've got a really entrepreneurial culture, and then absolutely kind of ball out the people who worked on something and it didn't work. Because that's, you know, that you're not focusing on encouraging the behaviors that you want. So I think, and the good thing about that is like everyone can have a hand in that. It is not just senior people. You know, what you say at the top and right on the wall in terms of your values and not the most important thing. The most important thing is what behaviors do you focus on? What behaviors do you not overlook, for example?
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think what's important is I think senior people have a tendency to ignore things and find, because culture is hard because it's intangible.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think if we're being honest about our industry today, I think that in a people business there are 5 tenets to running any people business. You've got culture, you've got talent, you've got structure, process, and you've got tools, and it should work in that order. It's the senses, and in the modern world, people run to the tools first. So I'm going to invest all the time in the tools because they're tangible. I can see, understand them, and they start going the other way around. But the reason why I think culture is so important is I don't think there's. It's easy for me to say what I think is a good culture and a bad culture. What I've learned basically is that what culture is there's the right culture for someone, the wrong culture for someone, and the right culture means that you see the best of yourself on more days than not. And we all know we've all got the best of ourselves, we've all got the worst of ourselves. And that's the truest same of any client walking into any agency. There's the best of us and the worst of us. And if the right culture will mean you see the best of you on more days than not. And when you find that, that's what you've got to hold on to. And it's important you understand it, because the culture is not going to be right for everyone. And I think one of the things that happens in particularly in new business, people will say, we've got a great culture that's right for everyone. It can't be. I mean, it's why, to be honest, I quite like the bad chemistry meeting. The one I don't like is the one where the chemistry meeting was all right. So. Yeah. It's like, well.
I think you're right. I think there's a real balance between the way in which the organisation runs things and the people within it. But we teach it within the academy. You know, there's 2 really important things that are in place for a company to be rocking on all cylinders. On the one side, you've got that organisational piece. So that is all of the systems, the processes, the methodologies, the tools, you know, all of the hierarchy or the red tape, all of the regulatory stuff, all of the stuff that enables the company to produce whatever it is it does. So it's a service or it's a product, whatever, with consistency. And that organisational piece is vital. But on the other side are the individuals, the people, which is all the hopes, the dreams, the ambitions, the beliefs, the behaviours, the attitudes. You know, that's where the lifeblood sits, which is also, it's almost like that's the software. The organisation is the hardware. But where companies really fuck it up is when they put too much focus on the organisational stuff and not enough arms around the people. And unfortunately, we're living in an age where when shit happens, you know, when something happens that we can't control, like a pandemic, or, I don't know, losing a massive chunk of business, or even winning a massive chunk of business, there's almost like an instinct default that goes, we've got to look at the way in which we're delivering this, which is the organisation side, instead of thinking, let's engage our people and find out what ideas they've got of us being able to do this to the best of our ability. Companies forget that there's this constant balance between the two. And when that balance is in harmony, in my view, that's when you get a rocking culture. You know, it could be a different culture, every company ultimately having a different culture. But when it rocks is when the balance between those 2 are in place. And you unfortunately don't see it.
Hello, how are you doing?
There's no one else in my house. It's not mine.
No one else in mine either. It's not me. Magnus, it's you, isn't it?
It's not me.
Yeah, so your internet's a little bit jumpy, Kevin.
Doing us.
So
I think basically
can I make sure you're on Google Chrome, right?
I think
everything else is off.
Oh, it's Kevin! I can hear Kevin. They're doing a run through.
And
I don't know what to do. I don't know whether we should just carry on talking above them. I think we might be all right now.
I think they're gone. Yeah.
No, we can still hear you. There's Katie going. We can hear Kevin on the line. We can hear Kevin on the live feed. So, guys, talking about that then, that balance between the organisation and the individual, I'd really be interested to hear how you would describe cultures within your agencies. Magnus, maybe come to you first. What do you feel is the kind of the unique, special sort that surrounds Saatchi and Saatchi from a cultural perspective?
So look, I mean, like I said, I think culture comes from the people. So we always look. I'm a history student, so I always look back to go forward. So we're an agency set up by two brothers, but whose parents escaped persecution in Iraq to come to the UK. One of them never worked in advertising. So we'll say there's an element of it's a bunch of outsiders who came together who thought they could change the industry, and they did it with chutzpah, which is a great word to have in the back of your mind. It was, and from off the back of that, Jeremy Sinclair, right? I know because every time I talk to Murray, I'd love to take the step. He wrote the 3 words: "Nothing is impossible." And so for me, basically, that is, I think it's really helpful to have totems when you've got a culture. So those words, "nothing is impossible." So when we moved buildings, I took the original step with us. Even though it fit, I had a new step engraved and built. It's the only thing we have written in stone. And then when you walk into the building, as you walk in, for everyone, every day, as soon as you walk in, you look up, in 6-foot letters is on top of the building, the words "nothing is impossible." Because that sense of restlessness, that chutzpah that we want to take to everything, sits at the deep soul and heart of who we are. And when we get it wrong, is because what happened historically is a group of outsiders changed the industry and became the industry and stopped being the outsiders trying to change it and make it better. And so that piece for us is and it's not a coincidence that you've got the son of some Ghanaian immigrants who spent some time growing up on a council estate, finding himself running Saatchi and Saatchi. It's not a coincidence. I've got a creative director who'd never lived in England, didn't really know what was going on in the place. And it's not that sense of being on the outside and trying to change it is I think is for us is really, really important. And it's because we want to keep hold of that not knowing what can't be done, if that makes sense, and keeping hold of that bit of naivety. So, and it means with it, which we're clear with our clients on it from a cultural perspective, is we're probably not the best when someone wants status quo, or you want we'll be restlessly trying to go, could it be this way, that way, and that doesn't work for everyone. But we're clear on it.
And Magnus, does that affect the types of clients you go after, or indeed the ones that you win? How important is it to Saatchi and Saatchi that there is a cultural match or indeed tension between the Saatchi culture and the culture of your clients?
So I think with all things, you're not looking to mirror each other. So someone was asked that. So it's one of those things I learned when I was getting older. Basically, so there was a point basically where I think I used to date people who were just like me, and you realise I've got me. My wife is very different to me, but the partnership together is together. She helped bring out. So that's what we're looking for, not to mirror each other, but therefore, in order for us to feel we might help bring out the best in the client, we know if you've got a problem and you've got a challenge, or you've got a height you're trying to get to, we might be the people to talk to. If you're just trying to slowly evolve, we're probably not. If it's a case of I just want things to be easier, we're probably not the best people to do that. Right. But we're sort of clear on that, and therefore, I mean, I haven't been inside the UK agency for a while. I know they did a chemistry meeting recently where I sort of said to the CEO, I'm not don't know if you want to do that. They did it, but Kevin said that went really badly. We're not going to go forward. And I was like, I mean, to be honest, it went brilliant. because we both know that was never going to work. So it's good that you know now rather than follow the process. I can think of one client who really instigated us with us in a chemistry meeting where we were trying to be, which I'm sure Kevin will talk about, we were trying to be sort of perfect people and giving all the right answers in the chemistry meeting. And it was actually a guy called Mark Evans, who you know well, Direct Line. Mm-hmm. And he interrupted us and said, look, I'm not sure I think you think more than this overall. And I've been sat through a few of these, etc. Like, honestly, gloves off, what do you reckon? And so literally, okay, we just stopped the meeting. We went, right, by the way, I've come across some brands with some challenges. You've hit the jackpot of all three. And we went through what they were and why we thought, like, you've got a small problem here. But off the back of it, 20 quarters of decline to 20 quarters of growth. But he helped us find our voice and who we were, what the best clients do.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, I've seen certainly within agencies that sometimes a cultural mismatch has resulted in the agency resigning the account because, dependent on exactly how wide apart you are, the way in which another culture organization will treat you and therefore will treat people within your agency, can actually be quite harmful. Even back a million years ago, I used to be a headhunter and I ran my own agency, different industry completely, but I know of 3 or 4 huge accounts that we ended up resigning with chunks of cash leaving the business because some of the stakeholders would have my team in tears. And I was just, no, it's not happening. It's just not happening. I don't care.
That's a great example of.
I don't care if you're 20% of my business. I'm not working with you.
That's a great example of not ignoring something. So, and I don't think you have to have exactly the same cultures, but I do think you and your clients have to have the same values. A bit like a relationship, like Magnus said. So you have to hold the same things dear, and I think the example of being able to part ways with a client who doesn't hold dear what you hold dear is really important, because again, it's a classic example where leadership might say, we value diversity and we value creativity and, we value people having a voice. And then maybe a client comes in and treats the team not like that at all, disrespectfully, bullying, doesn't value certain things that the agency value, and senior management ignore it. And actually that sends a signal, the senior management say one thing, but what you're doing effectively is ignoring behavior, which is communicating really powerfully something else.
Yeah.
And those kind of things shape your culture, whether you want it to or not. And the best clients, bring difference and they shape you in a brilliant way. Like you said, Mark Evans did with you guys, Magnus, they bring out the best in you, but equally they can shape you in a negative way if their values are really run counter to things that you hold dear and the things that you think you can add.
Yeah.
I think
and they can play lip service, right? So you can in the often organizations, and sometimes even big ones, they have a cultural face that they pay lip service to, and then they have the realities of the behaviors in which they embody, on an ongoing basis inside the organization. It can take time to work that out. Sorry, Magnus, I cut across you.
I would say I agree, because I think to me, I think values aren't values unless they come.
Yeah, the classic, yeah.
And the Dalai Lama said, change everything apart from your values. And I definitely remember on one particular client, it was a CEO who and it was in my time at Fallon, but it was a CEO who the CEO of an organization treated me poorly. And in a discriminatory way. And so what we did, I enjoyed a 2-hour train journey to go and tell them we were firing them as a client. And I've never had a better 2-hour train journey because it was our values. It's because it was important to us, said to everyone else, as what we were prepared to do. And it came at a cost and we lost some money, but we kept what was important to us as a community and as a family.
Yeah,
it's interesting hearing Magnus talk about Saatchi's, because when we went into TBWA, I'd come from a culture that was very, very strong and knew exactly what it was about, which was mother. And, no one had to write up values, or it was just in the ether because the founders were all still there. When I went to TBWA, it was a very different position, which was it was a TBWA, the brand that I knew from 20 years ago. the Apple company, the company that was famous for PlayStation and did Apple crazy ones. You know, I was like, yeah, I know what TBWA is, kind of like, but it was a turnaround in London. And I went and we sort of kept things, we were like, just keep it quite loose, and, you know, the values will come from the people. And actually after about 6 months, what we realized was London as a group of people, as that office, actually wasn't quite sure what it was. And the guys asked for more direction on it. And TBWA has been, like you guys have, Magnus, like you've got your stuff carved on the steps. TBWA has always been the disruption company. It was Jean-Marie Drew wrote, I think when me and Magnus started a million years ago, you know, he wrote the book about disruption. He was the first person to use the word disruption in a marketing context. Now it's kind of 10 a penny. And it was about, you know, positively disrupting to try and make things better. And it's also always been called the Pirate Collective, the Pirate Agency, because compared to DDB and BBDO, we're like the scrappy young cousin. It's the kind of the most indie of the networks in a way. And so, and we would just repeat these things to the team, disruption and pirates. And after about 6 months, they were like, what does it actually mean? And like, what does it mean for us? Can you just explain? Can you explain it? And I was like, I'm not writing values up. You know, if you have to write your values up, your values are dead. And the agency were like, no, that would be quite helpful, actually. And it was really different, realizing that whilst you don't choose what the culture is, as a leader, you do have a role to play and an obligation to sort of set a frame for people. So we did write some values, which I found I was like, Robert Savile would turn in his grave at Mother. We were never allowed to do this there. But we did, and we said, right, we're about being challenge the status quo, because people had come from a failing agency and they were quite timid. We said it's all about collective spirit, because in an agency that hasn't been doing well, people get quite focused on their own things. And we said it's about being entrepreneurial and allowing people to take risks, which again, I was like, this sounds really obvious. But going into somewhere which has lost its sense of culture, we realized it was quite important to try and reset it. Then after about 6 months, we were like, people need to be living these values a bit more. So my sense was, right, well, we'll tell people how we should live them. And my brilliant MD, Katie, was like, I've got a better idea. Why don't we ask people how they'd like them to show up more often? So she did a series of like open lunches. She sat in a room every day for an hour over lunch, and people came in at all levels, and they were like, why isn't it in our appraisals? And it's not really, why do we not call out behavior that isn't collective? Why do we? And they came up with loads and loads of ways that they wanted to see the values come to life, through from like having Pirate of the Month, some big things, some small things, birthday lunches, you know, all kinds of daft things. And actually, it was the first time that they were taken up by the agency and like made their own, rather than me saying, well, collective spirit is doing this. It was such a learning for me, like what you as a leader, what you owe to the business to try and input, and then where you need to allow a group of people to take it on themselves, like your kind of toilet roll moment, I think, Magnus. And that was, I think, going into somewhere which required a turnaround was the thing that fascinated me about culture most, because what do you do to encourage people when things aren't working? And then when it came to the pandemic, we actually survived pretty well, because I realized that previously I'd been in really high performance, successful cultures. And actually, when the shit hits the fan in somewhere that's always been top of the tree, it's a bit tough. But by God, our crew was so tough, because they'd gone from losing money 10 years in a row to suddenly being a really profitable agency and Campaign New Business League for the last 3 years. And they were like, we could do a pandemic. Like they knew how to pull together when things didn't go well. And I was so amazed, versus some other places that have always been like plain sailing, struggled a bit more. And I think that's also really interesting. A culture can build in its own resilience. You know, it gets used to operating in different ways and different kinds of situations when actually the management are not in control of everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. And let's just, I just want to explore that a little bit more, because you had the luxury, really, because it doesn't happen often, that it can be sort of created as an organic thing, right? But I would imagine a lot of people watching this today have joined a business that's already got a culture, and they've either made the right decision and the company's made the right decision in hiring them, they've made the right decision in joining, or maybe not. They might be facing a changing culture, which I think is probably happening a fair amount. So I guess my first question is, how important is it when you're bringing people into the organization, so this is for either of you or both of you, to ensure that culturally they would be a fit? Or is it just not more attractive? And we all know how important it is to get diversity of thinking in our industry. Well, diversity and inclusion in its full context within our organisations. How much freedom or risk do you take bringing in somebody that may be a bit of a cultural challenger?
It's such a hot topic at the minute, because I think the heuristics of what we're used to is hiring for cultural fit. The old, the classic, but would I like a train journey with them? Would I? And the problem with that is it's led towards lack of diversity, because it means that people hire people who are a bit like them, who fit in with what they're like. And I think we all have learned in the last few years that actually you need diversity of thought and diversity of demographics to build a resilient, creative organization. So I think now we'd look to hire less for fit and more for kind of what cultural value can someone bring? What can they bring that's additive? And that is a little bit harder, because you're not kind of going, well, do I get on with this person? And do they have the same topics to talk about as me? What we've tried to do in order to change that up a bit is introduce different people into the interview process. So not just being interviewed by the same people. So maybe getting them interviewed by someone who's much younger or who works in a completely different department, and try and be much more aware about how we're evaluating people as they come in, but really moving away from the concept of fit.
Yeah. And how about you, Magnus?
Yeah, so to me, I actually am not, I'm not sure anyone allows me to interview anyone these days, but I've always asked the same question. I asked the same question, and it hasn't changed for me, basically. I'm always looking to ask people, basically, what about us do you think you can change for the better? And what are you looking for us to change about you? Because for me, basically, that's what I mean. Basically, a great marriage is when both parties change for the better. And you see it, basically. We know when our friends basically find the right partner, because you see them change for the better. And that's what you're looking for. And that's that amazing alchemy when you find that the perfect fit. And it's that's why as I've got older, I've got prouder about being the son of immigrants, because what I love about it is if you leave your country to move to another one, you've got to change at some point. You can't be exactly the same. But the key to being successful as an immigrant is to change the country you go to too. You've got to add something to it and bring something to the party. And so for me, basically, that's because cultures have to go somewhere. It's like the relationships have to go somewhere. They have to move forward. So they can't just stay in stasis and our culture's so perfect and we're going to hermetically seal it and hold on to it. And if I was a client going into an agency, if they don't, that's what you're looking for from the client as well. We help change you for the better, and you help change us, because that's what growth is.
Yeah, I get that. And so what would your advice be to somebody who's in an agency? They've either in an agency, been there for a while and the culture's shifting, or just joined a new organisation, or just about to join an organisation. What advice would you have for people to be able to directly make an impact, a positive impact on the culture, without risking that organ rejection or the organ rejection of the host? What advice have you got? Proactive ways of influencing the culture.
It's interesting, because it can feel, sometimes people can feel quite powerless. It's it's easy for me and Magnus to sit as CEOs and presidents and go, well, you just do this, but I do think that, and when I see the most successful teams in the business, I think that individuals at any level do have a lot of power to influence the team around them. And it starts with your own behavior. I know it seems really obvious, but we observe teams, the classic thing you get is, why, people say, why don't my team pull together more? And it's like, well, how often do you really ask them how they are? How often do you make them feel like a team and kind of, talk to them? The other classic one we hear is, why don't people just lean in and kind of take responsibility? And it's like, well, do you treat them like adults? You know, do you really ask them what their perspective is and their point of view is? And that just comes from your own behavior. So I just think observing how you interact with people around you, and starting to operate with your desk mates or your teammates or your client team in the way that, you know, you want to be treated. And that has an amazing ripple effect. I mean, you can look around your business and see the client teams where they're really humming because they've sort of either had a conversation about how they want to work together, or it's just kind of tacitly, implicitly through their behavior. And so I think you can really, really impact the people around you. And I'd just say, just start being aware of how people experience themselves when they're with you. Like, you know, Magnus said, people want a great culture is where people feel they're having their best day more often. So just starting with, how do people respond when they're with me? How can I make them feel better? How can I make them feel more empowered and happier in their job? And that is like such a wonderful kind of positive, self-fulfilling prophecy. That.
And Magnus, what's your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first bit is that attitudinal thing. You've got to believe the culture is yours. It doesn't belong to some other force or senior force or establishment force. I think there are sort of three practical things. I think if I'm in there, that you can start doing on any given day. And so the first of those to me is, I think all cultures need totems, and everyone can create those totems. Yeah. They might be, and it is. It is, and Andy Jackson made this there actually. Okay, so I made a massive thing about the pub of the pregnant man. He created, and
he still has his stool.
Everyone, yeah, he still has his stool. And everyone, but the point for me is we have a pub that's a working pub that's open to the public, that is fantastic. But the reality is, like, why have you got a pub? And the truth is that it's, if we believe, we want one, and we believe that nothing's impossible, so we can go and create one and create our environment in doing it. And how it works and what it does is up to everyone else. So that's just an example of a totem, but there are many, many totems that sit around. So you need to know, and anyone can create totems about the culture. Second one, I think, is that it's like why religions have parables. Is it's really like culture, because it happens every day, and there are brilliant examples of it, and we have a tendency not to write them down and tell the stories. And so actually, basically, when you're doing something, the things that stand out that you love about the culture, the stories of what people have done, write them down and share them. Overall, that's all parables are. So write them down, share them. I mean, I used to do it. Like, when we were Fallon, we used to. So there is Chris Williams, the best written diary of the making of Sony Balls, because it literally, you go through it, as you go through this diary, you go, only a crazy person keeps going, basically, and it just keeps going, and it just ends with they have to build a new factory because they run out of TVs. But it's brilliant, as you go through that story, it tells you everything about that culture. So it's one of the things I ask people to do when I write such as this. You write down the things the stories that matter to you, the things that go, this is what's right about us, because then other people can repeat it. For me, I think that the parables for that is really important for me. And then I think sort of the last thing is in that many ways sort of celebrate the lack of perfection. That makes sense. The things that make us who we are. And it is, I think, when we expect perfection from every individual, every interaction, when we judge everyone, we're slowly killing culture in many ways, because it is. And I have been told over and over and over again, I mumble. I'm often told I need to smile more, basically, when I'm doing things like this. And it is, but it's me. And don't turn me into someone else. I mean, I recently said to my boss, I was like, look, what I wanted to be is the best Magnus Djaba I can be, not the best you I can be. And so, and to have that and make sure you are a guiding light of that spirit, because that's all, as we said, it's just about people seeing the best of themselves on more days than not. And that is like perfection.
I love that. Love that.
The one I'd add to Magnus's list is rituals as well. And there's so much you can learn from religion. And I think celebrating certain things is one of those rituals. And you can have enforced rituals, like And when people join Airbnb in the old days when they're in the office, they sort of make a tunnel of their arms and they make people go through it. It's quite an enforced ritual. And imagine if you're someone who doesn't really like that. You don't really want to do that. But you can just have small rituals in your team. So, if you want people to be like, what stuff do you call out and reward? If you want people to take more responsibility for new business, for example, well, start all of your company meetings by celebrating new business success. Or you want people to feel welcome into the organization. What do you do when people join? And if you're joining a new team, one thing you can also do is just work with what rituals are there, like observe what people do. I was at BBH years ago that I joined a team and they had they created their own ritual of they were stuck out in a bit of the building where no one really went, and they created a ritual where they started a cake trolley. Since it's such a tiny thing, they started a cake trolley and they would do a quiz for the whole agency before Google was invented, where they'd email out questions and people would email back answers, and the first person who got it, they would wheel the trolley over and that team could have the cake. And if you observe that ritual, what you noticed was that team felt kind of left out. It was the British Airways team. They were like stuck out on a limb, and they created that as a way of making themselves feel more integrated within the rest of the company, and it worked perfectly for them. And it didn't have to be invented by someone at the top. And so sometimes you can create rituals that influence culture, but also just try and observe what's there already in your team or in the company that you go into. Some rituals are not good. Remember the days of when people used to leave and they used to send a top 10 in the agency email who they used to fancy. That's a great example of a bad toxic ritual that people just let it go on because they were like, oh, it's just how it is.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is my tip. I don't think anybody should just stand for, well, that's how it is, that's how it's done around here. And so no matter what level you are within an organization, if there are things that are countercultural or counter to values or beliefs or behaviors that are showing up that are less than helpful, then you must find the courage to call that out. Because if you don't, then it's just going to continue to reaffirm. And you'll end up leaving the business anyway, because it won't be the right business for you. So that courage that goes, do you know what? I'm going to give feedback. I'm going to call it out when I see it. I'm going to give feedback. I'm going to talk to my bosses about this. I'm going to talk to my peers about this. Giving that feedback, I think, is really crucial. And then one of the last things I'd say, just on a business development context, that celebrating of success, that celebrating of win, there's nothing more powerful than that in my view. That real overt celebration of wins and losses. Yeah, that's what can create a culture around you. I'm going to leave you, because we've got 1 minute left, with a couple of quotes, because when I was doing my research, I saw some really cool ones. So Airbnb, I think, Sarah, you mentioned. Brian Pesky says, culture is simply a shared way of doing something with a passion. Quite like that one. Groupon, founder of Groupon, says, hire great people and just give them the freedom to be awesome, which I also like. This one has to be my favorite. It's Jeff at Amazon. Says, our culture is friendly and intense, but if push comes to shove, we'll settle for intense. Love him. Wouldn't want to work there, but love him. And so we are at time, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Sarah and Magnus, for being so generous with your time and the wonderful words of wisdom. I'm assuming everybody can get hold of us if they need to. Make sure that you stay for the rest of the day, people. Kevin Allen will rock your world. He is amazing. Stay for Kevin. And we will see you really soon. I'm assuming they'll just take us off screen now.
Such a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.